in at least.
Yeah, I'm just doing this. I'm just recording. You know, if you heard it was recording, I'm just doing that so that way I have a way to go back and see what we talked about. I'm going to try to take notes as much as possible. So it's not like anything we're putting here. I'm not going to put it up on YouTube or anything stupid like that.
So this won't be used for any.
No. This is just for me. So because it's due Tuesday night, so we're going to talk now. And I have all those stories that Eric gave me, and I'm going to put together some stuff, and my son's going to help me put it up on my WordPress site and get it up there. But nothing, no incriminating.
No, it's good. No, I mean the Carvana issue was probably one of the most involved community issues with the village in at least 4 or 5 years, maybe much longer. And the Old Orchard issue also, it didn't generate that kind of interest, but I think the Chicago Tribune editorial,
Chicago Tribune, Pioneer Press, they wrote about it.
I think that kind of hit hard. A lot of people started paying attention to it after the editorial because it was such a scathing editorial.
Yeah. So with the Old Orchard, like I know that basically we moved to Niles in 2017. We lived out in Mount Prospect prior to that. So, pretty much we've been going to Old Orchard, for basically for Christmas and walking around and stuff. And my wife and I first met 20 years ago. We used to go to Old Orchard. I used to hang out by Lincolnwood and stuff like that. And so I know we went there in 2020. Me and the wife and kids, we went to Barnes and Noble, and we went downstairs and we were playing around and looking at all those things. But when I went over to take some pictures just a couple of weeks ago, Barnes and Noble looks like it's closed, right?
Yeah, they've closed.
Yeah. So is that something that happened recently, or because I was talking to my daughter and she seems to think that she and one of her friends actually went over to Barnes and Noble's around Christmas time of this year.
Please don't quote me on this because this is something I'm not 100%
right.
sure.
Right. Okay.
From my understanding, Barnes and Noble, they didn't extend Barnes and Noble's lease, and from my understanding, there was maybe some hope that they could possibly relocate to a smaller store within the mall.
Oh, okay.
Because these huge bookstores, it's like 2022, they don't need those huge spaces anymore.
Right. Okay.
So something else is going to move into that space.
Okay.
It's just I don't know. I haven't heard the final about.
Right. Okay. So I guess we'll just the Carvana thing at first. Maybe you can just.
Yeah.
It hasn't been built yet, right?
No.
Okay, and it's a proposed 14-story, basically car elevator by the Skokie Holocaust Museum in the path of the migratory birds, and that's what basically people are up in arms about. I've seen I did see the proposed picture of how it would look with all the surrounding, and it's like an obelisk. It's like a glass obelisk sticking up in the middle of a bird sanctuary. It looks ridiculous, So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And how many board members are on Skokie? Is it like 8 board members or something like that, or is it only 3? I was a little confused on that.
7. It's so the village board is the mayor and 6 trustees.
Oh, okay. So you're one of the trustees.
I'm one of the trustees.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, the mayor is kind of like technically a trustee of sorts.
Right.
It's an equal member of the board. He's just kind of the chair of the board. So it's 7 votes. I was the only one who voted against this. It was 6-1.
Right, against for the Carvana. Yeah, because then Eric had sent me it was a link to something on Nextdoor, and apparently someone who was there in the crowd showed the video of the one trustee actually physically turning his back on people.
That was at the second meeting, and actually just last week this week actually at our Monday meeting, that trustee actually kind of apologized.
Okay.
A short public apology.
Probably got some pushback on that one.
He did. It was. I sit next to him. He just got. He got frustrated.
Oh, okay.
Out of character. He offered a very heartfelt apology.
Right.
There was a woman in the crowd who kind of was often being a little disruptive, and when she went up to speak, he kind of got flustered.
I see. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I know. I think Eric did mention something about you personally were getting like attacked by some of the board members or something for the stances that you were taking. Yeah. So it was getting kind of heated. So I can see that happening. Yeah.
At the February 7th meeting, where the first vote, which was kind of the real packed meeting.
Okay.
In the kind of closing comments and the comments that were made by trustees during the vote.
Right.
A few of the trustees used that time to partially criticize me. One, it's on YouTube. It's on our village website.
Right.
One was very directly critical of me. There was some frustration, obviously, that I had said how I was going to vote before the vote.
Right.
Which so that was something that came up. Yeah.
So at this point, you obviously had the February 2nd meeting where the Carvana issue was first raised and had to February 22nd. So at this point, here we are on March 11th. Has there been any final adjudication of the issue that says, yes, we are going to give this to Carvana and we're going to be moving forward, and there's going to be a groundbreaking of it, or is it still in process?
The groundbreaking, the actual like construction and all of that, that's Carvana. That's out of my hands. But at least at the village level, we are done.
Okay.
We have given final approval.
Okay.
For major ordinances or major approvals, it requires 2 votes. So we did a preliminary vote and we did a final vote, and it's
okay.
At least so our end of it is done. Now it's Carvana. No, it's
okay.
They've been given approval.
Right. So if there's any right. So I mean, the limited knowledge that I know of how villages work, is like you have ordinances, and then you have to have permits and whatever. So okay. So basically the approval has been given for Carvana to move forward, and what happens after that, that's in Carvana. So at least, okay. So it has been approved. Now the approval that happened at the February 22nd meeting, the final approval, and that was that a 7-1 vote?
6-1.
6-1. That was a 6-1 vote, and you were the only member who voted against it. Okay. Do you have any, like, what would be the reason? What would be one of the major reasons that Skokie would want to go ahead and do this? Would it be like another business that can employ people? Would it be tax revenue or something like that?
Sales tax revenue would be the number one reason, and car dealerships are far more profitable than your average business for generating sales tax revenue. So a car dealership is a little perhaps more appealing from a purely economic perspective.
Right. I know. Yeah. As
Carvana gave us kind of a big report of the project, and they estimated that in 10 years that this location would generate up to $9 million in sales tax revenue just for the village, because the village gets 1% of sales tax on a car that is processed through this facility. It doesn't necessarily have to be bought at the facility or even purchased by someone in Skokie. But if it's processed through the facility, then the village of Skokie gets 1%. So I mean, it's just it's kind of an understanding of what is appropriate economic development.
Right.
I approach this as like, I get that there's a sales tax revenue benefit, but I just found the location to be terribly inappropriate.
Right.
It's right next to a residential building. For months, we were getting emails from and hearing public comments from these poor residents who are saying, my bedroom window is going to look out over a tower of used cars now. What is that going to do to my property value? What's that going to do to my quality of living? And so we're representatives of residents. So
right.
This is just my philosophy. I think every trustee approaches this differently, but for me, it's kind of residential interests kind of trump commercial interests by the very nature, for me, of my position, because I'm a representative of residents, not a representative of businesses.
I got you. Yeah, you're not necessarily working for the Chamber of Commerce, right?
Exactly. But it's not that the economic well-being of the community is not a part of my job. It's just residential interests kind of come first. And for me, the site was just a clash between Carvana's interests and the interests of this community. This is the largest residential building in all of Skokie. This is between 1,500 to 2,000 people live in these buildings. So this is not This is a lot of people that are going to have to live right next to this pretty hideous tower. It's very subjective. That's a subjective.
So yeah, no. So it was mostly okay. So it's pretty much based on tax revenue. Like in terms of economic jobs, like was there any kind of proposal that said Carvana was going to bring a certain number of jobs to Skokie and employment of people as well?
Yes, I don't remember the numbers. It was like
Probably not
11.
too much.
You know, I don't think these are particularly high paid jobs either.
Right.
At
Be
least
like a
for the most
porter or
part,
something
besides.
like that. Right.
Um,
Carvana, everything's done online. As far, I mean, I've seen Carvana and I see that, and then I've seen other places where they
Yeah.
have those elevators and stuff. And I've never really been interested in it just from the way they do
Yeah.
business, but that's just me. So
I can tell you at least what the village board got from in terms of what we were told from the Carvana representatives and what we were told from village staff. Jobs was not something that was emphasized. It was
Mhm.
really sales tax revenue that was emphasized.
okay. So basically, you said over 10 years, it looks like Skokie will get about 9 million. So roughly,
That's
what
what
about?
they estimate. That's what they estimate. And
Uh,
a lot of the public criticism, especially near the end,
Right.
centered around people saying that they think that those estimates are very inflated.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Which I think is a somewhat fair assessment. So, I mean, that 9 million number, that's Carvana's estimate. So I
Right.
think it's fair to assume that that's a little optimistic.
Right. They might only be 6 or 7 million for all we know. Right.
Right. I mean, but I think from the village's perspective, it's still substantive. It's still a lot, even if it's not 9 million.
Right. And that's over 10 years, correct?
Over 10 years.
So basically, we're looking at even if we take what they say at face value at 9 million over 10 years, that's maybe what $850,000 a year, something like this. So I don't know what the budget of Skokie is, but I don't know.
And their estimates have it going. You know, their estimates are it's starting low and going up.
Going up
So
high.
their immediate, the immediate gain might only be $200,000.
Right. Once it
I
takes
don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So obviously that was enough that because I'm used to like dealing with like budgets like from Chicago and stuff. I lived in Chicago for many years, and I'm used to following like federal budgets and stuff where we're talking billions and billions. If somebody even says $1 billion to them, that's chump change. So when I hear 9 million over 10 years, it's kind of like, to me, I'm kind of like, well, how much money is that really? It doesn't strike me as being that much money. But I guess to the trustees that it was enough money to sway them. They probably have other ideas about what things they can do with it, right? Maybe they want to do some park. Did anybody ever talk about anything like that? Like what they would do with that extra money?
Oh yeah, I mean, with the space.
Yeah, with the money that they're going to be getting from the tax money they're going to be getting, are there going to be some improvements to Skokie or something like that? Or
It'll just a huge part of our budget does come from sales tax revenue, and this is actually, I think, something that I don't think a lot of people understand about this is that the Skokie's revenue stream is more reliant on sales tax revenue than property tax.
Oh, okay. That's
and
interesting.
normally in most communities, it's flipped. Most
Right.
communities rely more on property tax than sales tax. But because historically we have locations like Old Orchard,
Right.
lots of sales tax generation, historically, for many, many decades, the village of Skokie has relied more on sales tax so that we don't have to raise property tax in the village. But for me, I think it makes it tricky with sites like this because we are very reliant on sales tax revenue, but this is not, in my opinion, an appropriate project for a site like this. So I think because we're so reliant on sales tax revenue, I think, to be very frank with you, I think sometimes we make poor decisions.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue into the Old Orchard situation. Because from what I've read, it seems like it's there. I mean, I'm a little confused. I read about the Tribune, and the Tribune talked about what they quoted what Pioneer Press had written about, and they talked about potentially Old Orchard being listed as a quote unquote a blight. So, and I guess the purpose of that was, from the gist of what I got from the Tribune articles, that it was like $5 million in extra tax revenue, and that was going to be directly given to the owners of the mall, not necessarily put into the.
It's more complicated than that. Okay. So what this is called a business district. And the state allows this. We've never done this in Skokie before, but there are many other communities that have used this tool before.
It's not like a TIF or anything like that, is it?
It's similar to a TIF.
Okay.
Except it does not impact property taxes. It impacts sales tax.
Okay.
So what it does is you can draw an area, you can create a business district,
Right.
If it is a blighted area, that's one of the conditions. One of the conditions is it has to be a kind of an underdeveloped, underutilized, blighted
Right.
area.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can increase the sales tax in that area by 1/4%, 1/4%, 0.5%, 0.75%, or maximum 1%.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For just that area. It does not go in their pockets, so to speak.
Okay.
It goes to the village, just like the sales tax that the village collects,
Okay.
it goes to the village. But then we have a development agreement with Westfield, so that money then goes back to Westfield. But there are very specific it's a very legal agreement about what they can do with these funds.
I see. Right. Right.
They're
Okay.
not, all of this money will go towards redevelopment and rehabilitation at the mall.
Okay. That's good. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But, kind of my argument against it was, and kind of what we heard from a lot of people and what we heard from the Tribune was, why is Westfield not doing this?
Right.
Isn't it their responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's so the blight. So
Yeah, how does that blight thing work? Because like I said, when I heard about the blight, I went there and I took pictures of Nordstrom's. Looks, I mean, I know I saw people walking in, but it looks really big and vacant. I think correct me if I'm wrong, but is Bloomingdale's even open?
I don't know.
I think Bloomingdale's is, so it looked kind of blighted. The pictures that I took did kind of give an indication of, yeah, maybe this is a little blight. I wanted to walk around and, maybe it was going to be one of these things where you take and every other store is not open or something like that.
I think blight is a very subjective thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There is kind of a legal definition in the state law.
Mm-hmm.
But something I've learned is that blight, how do we define what blight is?
Mm-hmm.
The state law gives municipalities like Skokie so much freedom,
right,
in defining what constitutes blight.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a requirement of a business district. So to make this happen,
Mm-hmm.
we had to designate the area as a blighted area.
Right. So what were the criteria used to get to that consideration?
It's in our, have you looked through like our agendas and stuff like that?
No, all I've seen is the two articles I read, the Pioneer Press and the Tribune.
Oh, okay.
If there's other resources I can check out, yeah, I can definitely do that too.
Okay, I would advise you to look through the documents that are in our public agendas.
Okay.
For March, what was it? March 7th, the recent Monday's meeting.
Okay.
I would look through the public.
So I go to Skokie.org and then kind of just go from there. Is it going to be?
Let me get you the link right now.
Yeah, within Niles, I sort of know my way around, and I've gotten some FOIA requests from them and stuff like that. I actually have that bookmark, but I'm not quite as familiar with Skokie. But I'm going to assume that similar towns probably do things similar. Don't even forget about Chicago. We can't even communicate with them.
I'm gonna put some stuff in the chat for you.
Okay. Agenda centers, board of trustees. Okay.
And I'm gonna send you.
And that'll show, yeah, because I'd like to put that in my piece and say, okay, Old Orchard has been declared a blight, and the first thing, my teacher and anyone else in class who sees it is going to want to know is what exactly does blight mean, and then I can explain what they mean and how they got there, so they have some understanding of what's going on. So, okay, that'll be good. I'll use that. Okay, and you said that the money is going to go to the village, and there's specific legal requirements for Westfield only to go to the mall. That'll be something that I can put in there, obviously, too, because I'm sure people would have a concern. Oh, great, we're going to give this money to the owners of the mall, and they're going to go ahead and buy themselves a yacht or something like that with it. So there's protections in there.
It's not. We are covering their expenses.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would frame it. We're not.
Okay.
This money isn't going into their pockets, but we are covering their expenses, and it's a lot more than $5 million. They, according to their estimates,
Mm-hmm.
this could be like $84 million.
How many?
84.
84 million. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Now I know what you're getting at. So it's $84 million over the course of the business district, because the business district lasts for 23 years.
Right.
Like
Right. I saw that.
Right. So they're estimating around $5 million a year.
Okay.
In additional revenue.
Right. Yeah, I did see that. Go ahead.
I was kind of against this just from the beginning. Like back in December, I voted against even proceeding with a public hearing to do it, to
Right.
talk about it, because Old Orchard Mall is the most commercially successful area of all of Skokie by
Right.
far. And it has been that way since the mid 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they have lots of, I know they have vacancies. But they also have lots of luxury stores. This is a mall with an Apple store and a Tiffany and a
Right.
Coach store and a Rolex store.
Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, that's high end stuff. Yeah.
And Westfield's redevelopment plan, and this is really important, is really oriented towards attracting more luxury business.
Okay.
They want to kind of create like a luxury wing of the mall. So, and I've heard mention of like they want to attract a Gucci store or a Louis Vuitton store. So it's, this is already a high end mall.
Right.
So for me to designate the most commercially successful area of all of Skokie
as a blight seems
as a blighted area, for me,
counterintuitive.
It's very so for me, it's been very clear from the beginning that we are doing this kind of in spite of the intent of the law.
Mm-hmm.
The intent of the law is clearly not with us here.
Right.
But what we are doing is not illegal. We have this power. So I think our, Westfield, and I think our village leaders, I think their understanding is if we can use this tool, we should. I would argue this is not the intended use of this tool, and this is an inappropriate use of this tool because I don't think this tool was designed to benefit multinational corporations like Westfield.
Right.
Westfield is one of the largest commercial real estate companies in the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Westfield has deep pockets. So I think, but to kind of go back to, if you want maybe to understand the rationale of it, to go back to the property tax, sales tax thing, we're very reliant on sales tax.
Right.
Something close to like 40% of the village's sales tax revenue comes from Old Orchard.
Wow.
So we have, the village has a lot at stake in Old Orchard. Old Orchard declines, we're going to take a big economic hit.
Okay.
Old Orchard expands its sales, we're going to
have a boom.
Benefit.
Yeah. Okay. So now it all seems to make sense because when I read the article in the Tribune, the Tribune's editorial board was basically saying that they didn't feel it was fair for the Westfield Mall and Old Orchard to be able to go ahead and get this tax things without having it spread out amongst the rest of the business community within Skokie. But like you said, you're getting 40%. So it's kind of like too big to fail. It almost sounds like to me.
Exactly. 100%.
Okay.
It's too big. It's honestly, that is 100% the thinking, because there's a lot of, this is a hard time for malls. Right. Malls are not that. It's a good time. Yeah. This is most malls are dying.
Right. Yeah.
And the rest are being forced to really reimagine and reinvent kind of what a mall is.
Right.
And so I think there's a terrible fear that because Westfield is too big to fail, or Old Orchard is too big to fail, there's a fear of what would happen if the mall really declined. They're trying to do the opposite. They're trying to be one of the last malls to survive. I think they're approaching it as like malls will die, but the ones that survive will do fine.
Right.
So they're kind of just like, we just need to make it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that because I know when I went and took the pictures, and I was outside of Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale's, and then obviously Barnes and Noble's a really huge store, and bookstores over the last couple of decades have definitely taken a dive with internet and multimedia stuff. I sort of thought to myself, I was like, yeah, these especially Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale, they seemed like really big structures. They seemed really big. It was like, wow, I didn't realize how big these buildings were.
I don't know if this is something that interests you for your writing, but Westfield actually, at the very beginning of this process, back in December, they proposed two things. And the second thing was the business district. The first thing was a property tax incentive through Cook County for the former Lord and Taylor building.
Right.
There used to be a huge Lord and Taylor department store at the mall,
Mm-hmm.
but it's now just a huge vacant space. No one in 2022 wants to lease a 2-story giant department store space. So we supported this Cook County property tax break for just the space. So it saves them property tax money over the next decade so that they can reinvest that money in that space, that very specific space.
Right.
And they're going to break it up. So they're going to take a 2-story department store and turn it into 4 or 5 smaller stores that businesses would actually want to lease.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I supported that. I voted for it.
Right. Uh-huh.
This is the second thing that they've asked for. And I think something I didn't say it in either of the meetings, but something I feel like is very important about this to understand is that this policy does not come from the trustees. It does not come from village staff. It comes from Westfield.
Right.
This entire business district plan was commissioned by Westfield representatives and lobbyists.
Right.
This is like very, very clear-cut corporate driven policymaking, which is why I from the beginning was a little skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have different names than the village. The village has an obligation to treat all businesses as equally and equitably as possible because we're a public body.
Right.
Westfield is a for-profit corporation, so they're not.
Mm-hmm.
We have different.
There has to be some separation there. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, as far as I know, the ultimate definition of fascism is when you have the absolute commingling of governmental and business interests, and government is supposed to be a referee because you have private business who wants to profit, and they may dump chemicals in our water and kill us all like DuPont's been doing, right? And on the other hand, you have people who want to live their lives and raise their kids, and we don't need to have a nuclear power plant dumping their waste in the water, but who cares? So the government's supposed to be in there and say, listen, you can't do this and we have to protect you. And then you have the citizens. So yeah, you're definitely erring more on the, like, let's do what's good for Skokie and the village of the people. And whereas it seemed like maybe some of the other trustees, maybe you're kind of thinking, hey, let's go more with the business economic end of things. And maybe the people aren't quite as important. I don't know.
Well, it's not, I wouldn't say they think of it that way. I think they think of it as all that money that's come into the village, all of that money is being poured into services. It's being poured into a police department, a fire department, a public works department, all these things to support the people of Skokie. Right. And so I think that's how they see it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So so your perspective is a little bit different. So in that you're just not sure that this is quite the right way to make this happen.
My perspective is, what is most profitable is not always what is most appropriate.
Okay. Right.
I would argue we shouldn't do the wrong thing just because it's profitable.
Right.
That's my argument.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of these cases were cases of like,
I
understand why we're doing this, but I think we should take the high road.
Right.
And not.
Yeah. So I actually just thought in my mind, it coined like a little, what's the term we use? It's like a catchphrase type thing. You could say like morals over money or principles over profits or something like that. I mean, just to be very generic about it. I mean,
And this Westfield deal, it doesn't really hurt other businesses in the community.
Okay.
All it does is further privilege one business, the most profitable. It's this is a kind of classic rich get richer kind of policy making.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But it's like there are other businesses around Old Orchard. Why weren't they incorporated into this business district? If this is a good idea for Westfield, why is this not a good idea for any of the businesses around?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's because we never considered them. We never considered any businesses besides Westfield.
Okay.
Westfield drew the lines.
Mm-hmm.
They presented this plan to us.
Right. So I guess in closing, what I want to accomplish is basically by having this business district in Westfield Old Orchard being declared as a blight, they're able to tack on an extra 1% sales tax. And then that sales tax will go to the village, and then that will help offset the cost that Westfield is going to use to supposedly redevelop it and make it better over what could be as much as 23 years.
But I think a lot of this redevelopment is going to happen in the next few years, hopefully.
Right.
I mean, but so they're going to, redo some of the public spaces. They're going to redo some of the entrances. They're going to create a kind of luxury wing. They're going to redo some of the facades of the department stores.
Okay. Right. Okay.
They're going to improve some parking areas. They're going to do all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
So that's what the money will be used for. I think it's more of a, at the meeting on Monday, we had a public comment. We had a few public comments, but one was from a small business owner who was kind of like, I live in Skokie. My business was hurt by COVID, but I have to bear the responsibility of rehabbing my business.
Right. Entirely on his back.
Entirely.
Right.
Why are you helping out Westfield in a way that, you're not helping everybody else out in? It's more of we're privileging.
I got you. Yeah. Well, like I said, the too big to fail type of thing, I think. And that's what struck me, because when you were talking, then I was thinking to myself how big, some of those buildings really were. And then I was just like, wait, big buildings, big business. Yeah. Okay. So I get a good picture of how the money's going to be used and what it's all there for. That's kind of what I want to communicate in my story. I just want to tell people, this is why Carvana is going to be built. It has gotten the final approval from the board, and it's going to be going forward. And this is why. And obviously, the information you gave me about the 40% of tax revenues comes from Old Orchard, and Skokie also goes ahead and gets more of its revenue from tax dollars than it does from property taxes. Like when we lived in Mount Prospect, we still own a condo over there, and it was more coming from property values than it was tax dollars, because Mount Prospect isn't a real big mall center. I mean, I live in Niles, and Niles to me is a big mall. And Schaumburg is a big mall. Skokie's a one big mall. Like some of these towns, they're almost like pseudo malls,
But lots of communities aren't like Skokie or Niles, where they have a big commercial area. A lot of towns are, I don't know, like Glenview or Morton Grove. There's not a huge commercial center. So inevitably they're going to get more of the municipality is going to get more of their revenue from property taxes than from businesses. We only do it differently in Skokie because of Old Orchard.
Right.
Because it's been this way for decades and decades.
Yeah. It sounds like Old Orchard is that one kid in the classroom would always break in the bell curve, so to speak, right? Either getting good grades, or maybe the one you go to gym class and everyone else is bench pressing 100 pounds, and there's one big lineman, he's bench pressing 400 pounds, and he's just breaking the curve for everyone. And since he's setting the standards for everybody else, if it wasn't for him benching 400 pounds, your team would lose his accreditation. So we have to give him all the special perks. Right.
If Old Orchard Mall was not in Skokie, I think our whole economic philosophy would be very, very different.
Right. Okay, that's interesting because, like I said, I did notice that Barnes and Noble and then Bloomingdale's and like here in Niles, there's been a nice strip mall on Milwaukee Avenue that we used to go to, and it had an old-fashioned 1980s style arcade. So it brought me back to when I was in high school and I'm playing with my kids. We went there for a couple of years, and now it's all gone. And up in Morton Grove, they had a mall that was been there since the 50s where I had my health club at, and the village went ahead and started levying $10,000 a month fines against the developers, and they made them tear it all down. Now they built a whole new one up there with Cane's and Starbucks and all those things. So the villages have, but I don't think any of those were anywhere near the magnitude of size and scope and tax revenue and ability to have an impact on the community that Old Orchard is. So I think from that standpoint, Old Orchard is kind of the 6-ton gorilla in the room, and and they're going to kind of maybe get their ways, for lack of better words.
Well, and they did.
And they did. Okay.
And it's I was against this from the beginning, but by the end, I was not to some degree. It's a huge mall. The cost of redeveloping the mall is astronomical.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Over $100 million. It's just astronomical.
Mhm.
So it's just like, I understand that they do need help, or,
Right.
but I don't think they need it as much as we gave them.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I know the thing I got from the Tribune was they were talking about how, some communities had been talked into building, using taxpayer funded dollars for stadiums, and they didn't realize it. And all of a sudden, years later, they realized they got taken. So it's, maybe that's a thought of that. We're going to, Old Orchard is, we're going to get taken.
I'll tell, this is, I feel like, an important part of this that I don't think people in Skokie even really grasp.
Right.
The village is not paying for this.
Right.
Consumers are paying for this.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Old Orchard shoppers are paying for this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it makes this more, I would say, kind of tempting from a village standpoint, because we're like, oh, well, we don't have to foot the bill. Go for it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If we had to foot the bill for this, we wouldn't do it.
Right. I got you. Mm-hmm.
But we've allowed them to pass the cost on to consumers.
Right. I know I saw that in the Tribune, and it was talking about 13.75% sales tax on something that you got at Maggiano's. And with the tip, you would literally order something for $20 and it'd be $30. So it's literally like 1/3, 33%. So then the question is, will people continue to pay that? Now, if the mall gets built up and it's really nice and it's renovated and people like to go there, and you don't go there all the time, hey, you know what? I'll pay $30 for a $20 pizza. No problem. I don't go there every single day. And then the extra money coming in is going to help.
Their argument is, sure, some people will be put off by the extra 1% and say, I'm not shopping at Old Orchard anymore.
Right.
But the overall benefit will generate enough money to redevelop the mall, which will attract even more people. Right. And because their redevelopment plan is so geared towards kind of luxury stores.
Right.
They're kind of like, they want to attract luxury customers.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They want to attract the kind of people who will drop $1,000 on a purse or a handbag and not think twice about a 1%. It doesn't mean anything to them.
Right. I got you.
Something that came up at the meeting was that, over 80% of Old Orchard customers are not from Skokie.
What percentage?
80.
80. Okay. Right.
Over 80% are not from Skokie. They're from Chicago. They're from the North Shore. They're from everywhere. They're from Wisconsin. They're from all over the place.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that even makes it even more tempting.
Sure, you're not sticking it right. If it was 80% of Skokie people, you're taking that money out of their pocket, just redirecting it.
Right. Mm-hmm. And this sentiment kind of came out in the meeting. Like, one of the trustees kind of literally said, like, you're telling me people I don't even know are going to foot the bill.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a dangerous perspective.
Sure. It's us versus them. Yeah. That's
right. And it's like,
we're all Americans. We're all Illinoisans.
We don't want our Skokie residents to go be screwed by other municipalities when they go shop in Evanston and Niles.
Right.
When Skokie people go to Niles, I don't want Niles to be doing something inappropriate to come take money from our residents, or I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's the co-opetition. I mean, you see it on a national level. Well, like, I know New York had a proposal where they were giving like a tax-free incentive for businesses to move to New York for like 10 years if they would move their businesses. And people are saying, hey, if you want to give me and my family a 10-year tax break, we'll pack up and we'll move there tomorrow. So because they want to bring businesses, and they're always in competition with each other, and businesses will go from one state to another. Hey, Mr. Texas, Mr. Illinois, Mr. Indiana, Mr. Louisiana, this is what we want to do. Make it worth our while to come to your state.
Yeah. And for municipalities, it's a race to the bottom.
It is. It really is. It is a race to the bottom. That's exactly how I would put it.
And that's not good for municipalities. It's not good for the people. It's only good for corporate interests. It's not.
Okay.
That's my perspective.
No, I totally agree. So obviously so we'll pretty much wrap it up then. So on the Carvana one, it was a 6-1 vote on there, and you were the dissenting vote on Carvana with 6-1. And so then on the ultimate of decision to go ahead and do the business district for Westfield, was that the same vote total, or was it different?
6-1.
Okay, well, still saying you were the lone dissenter on both times.
So far this term, we're less than a year in. We're 11 months in. So far this term, I'm the only person who has ever not voted yes.
Okay.
So every vote this term has been 7-0 or 6-1 with me voting no. But I vote yes. Like I did the math the other day. It's like 93-94% of the time.
I got you. Right.
I don't vote no that often.
Mm-hmm. Just when you feel like it's worth making a stand. I understand. Yeah, because I know when Mayor Daley was running Chicago, the joke was it's just a rubber stamp, over there, and we had 50 aldermen. And I think Helen Schiller was the only, was always 49-1, with Helen Schiller being the only vote against it. And you could pretty much just, what's the vote going to be? I think it's going to be 49-1. And Helen, sure enough, yeah, it was the way it was all the time. If it wasn't for her, it would have been 50-0 every single time. So it's good that there's to hear that there is someone who's going ahead and not necessarily marching lockstep, with everything and listening to consumers and trying to do what's right. And I really appreciate your time. And I definitely got some good information about this. And I'm going to go back and rewatch the video and try to write down, decipher some of my hieroglyphic notes that I went ahead and took here. Sometimes I take notes and my kids would be like, Dad, you can't even read your own handwriting. And I was like, yeah, I know I can't.
But, please, when you're done with this, please send it to me. I would love to read it.
Yeah, and it's also a possibility if I do, because I'm kind of trying to doing something a little more in depth and a little more having to do with business and government and stuff than some of the other kids. Some of their stories, they seem to be a little supercilious to me. I wasn't really interested in some of the stuff that I want to do something more in depth. And my teacher's been like, hey, if this is a good story, it might get published in DePaul. It might get published in DePaul's 14 East magazine too, and stuff like that. And that'll be.
I really think I think regardless of where you stand on these two issues,
right.
I think they are very fascinating case studies.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
They're great stories.
Yeah, definitely. I learned a lot of good information especially about how Skokie gets his tax revenue and all that stuff. Because obviously, I'm my base has usually been like, you get your money from property values, and that's why you go into places like Naperville where you have incredibly high property taxes and kids do so well, and then you go into places like Inglewood and the property values are nothing, and the kids really don't get much of an education because it's all based on property value. So one kid gets $5,000, the other one gets $25,000. Well, of course, a kid with $25,000 is going to wind up better off in the long run, but it is what it is. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day, obviously, social engineering and all that stuff. But
local governments are not always funded in the best ways, and that changes our decision making in ways that's not always for the interests of the people.
Right. Yeah, and government you have to do what you have to do to kind of look at the broader picture and say, hey, we don't want Old Orchard to completely die and we're going to lose 40% of our revenue. How are we ever going to get that 40% of our revenue back? We probably won't. So let's give something up front to get something in the long term, and hopefully that's going to play out.
What was hard for me is that the Westfield representatives were just openly saying, we're going to double sales at the mall. The opportunity is never been greater. This is a generational opportunity for business.
Right.
I was just sitting there being like, if the opportunity is so great, you should pay for it. If you're going to double sales at the mall, then why do you need us?
Right. What do you need our help for? What are you coming out
for? If things are so great, why are you here? I don't know. Exactly. All right. Nice talking to you. When you're done with it, send it to me. I'd love to read it.
All right. Take care. Bye.
All right. Take care.